Alright guys, today I wanted to make a video about Chelsea's recent reappointment of Frank Lampard as manager, this time on an interim basis until the end of the season. But I mean, we've seen in the past how people like Ole Gunnar Solskjaer at Man United, they've managed to go from an interim manager into a permanent role just because of short-term success. Now, sometimes this doesn't end very well. Solskjaer, that there was highs and lows in his appointments at Man United, and I don't want to completely compare this to Solskjaer because it is a different case, because Lampard has been appointed as permanent manager first time round in 2019 and lasted 18 months. And like Solskjaer, I keep going back to Solskjaer, he had highs and lows in that time as in charge of Chelsea. In his first season, despite having a transfer ban, he managed to use what was a very young team and bring into the starting 11 players like Reece James, Tammy Abraham, Mason Mount, the obvious one, and get a tune out of them and get them into the top four, which was a really impressive first season as manager for Frank Lampard at Chelsea. Now, obviously, his second season, when he was given the money to spend and he brought in big name signings like Timo Werner, Kai Havertz, Edouard Mendy, Thiago Silva, Ben Chilwell, it didn't go very well and he ended up losing his job in January. Now, that season ended well for Chelsea as they won the Champions League, but yeah, it wasn't good for Frank Lampard. But he's been reappointed, and is it the right decision? 10 games to go, Chelsea don't have a lot to lose this season. No one's expecting them to win the Champions League. No one's even expecting them to come close to beating what can be a ruthless and formidable Real Madrid side in the quarter-final and then go on to play Man City or Bayern. So if Chelsea reach the final of the Champions League this year, or, well, if they reach the final, they stand a good chance of winning it. If they win the Champions League this year, and that's the biggest if ever based on their form so far this season, I think they probably do appoint Frank Lampard like permanently and give him a second chance, I think, because that would be one hell of an achievement. And also it's a different ownership as well. It was Roman Abramovich who appointed him as manager the first time round. This time it's Todd Boehly, obviously. So, you know, that can definitely play a part. I mean, we've already seen how ownership can affect the, you know, relationship between a manager and the owner, obviously, at Chelsea with Thomas Tuchel, because under Abramovich, Tuchel was doing very well and, you know, his job was never at risk. But under Todd Boehly, a bit of a tricky start to the season, where they had some poor results like the 1-0 loss to Dinamo Zagreb, the 3-0 loss to Leeds in the Premier League. That instantly put Tuchel and Boehly sort of in a bit of a tricky situation, and it ended up with Boehly deciding that Tuchel was not the man for the job, which I think is a mistake to this day. I think Chelsea would have had a better chance of turning it round under Tuchel than Potter, because Potter is very much a project manager. Potter was going to need time to get the squad how he wanted it, not in terms of the faces, not just in terms of the faces he wants it in the squad. I mean, there's enough Chelsea faces in this squad that there should be some that he likes, but also to get them to play the style of football he wants them to play, to have the understanding of how he wants his team to work. Like, he has a very unique way of doing that as well, as we saw at Brighton. So it wasn't the right appointment for a team that want instant success, in my opinion. So they've obviously got rid of Potter and Lampard's come in. Now, what Lampard's going to bring to Chelsea, I think, is the feel-good factor. I think the Chelsea fans never really took to Graham Potter, mainly and partly because of the love they had for Thomas Tuchel. And you even look at Thomas Tuchel's start at Chelsea. I remember a lot of Chelsea fans being very annoyed about Frank Lampard's sacking in January January 2021, I think it was, because, you know, he's a club legend, and it was, you know, it wasn't a completely horrendous season, but at the time he got sacked, it was a very poor start to the league, but they'd still got through in the Champions League. They were still, they still had a good chance of a cup run. Things like that. So a lot of Chelsea fans didn't want to see Lampard go, and because of that, they weren't fully taken on Thomas Tuchel, because Thomas Tuchel is not Frank Lampard. No one at Chelsea, pretty much nobody in Chelsea's history is Frank Lampard. Let's put it that way. He's the all-time top scorer and arguably their greatest player. I know a lot of people will say someone like Gianfranco Zola still ranks higher than him, or even John Terry. So yeah, he's definitely up there though, Lampard. So, but Tuchel managed to sort of get the fans on side, mainly by improving their position in the league, getting top four in back-to-back seasons, and also obviously winning the Champions League and the Super Cup and the Club World Cup. So, you know, he managed to get the fans behind him. Potter never did that, and that's why he's gone. So Lampard will definitely get the fans, you know, feeling like it's their team once again, I think is the correct way to put it. And it may just lift their spirits going into the summer, because I think it's going to be a very interesting summer transfer window for Chelsea, because they could do with bringing a couple of players in. There's definitely room in this squad for a striker. But there's going to be a lot of players who haven't, even like new signings this season, who haven't done enough and will be offloaded, I think. So it would be very interesting to see. And if this appointment of Frank Lampard goes as how we expect it to go, and my expectations for it are that maybe to begin with, in the next couple of games, Chelsea managed to get a couple of good results, probably go out in the Champions League to a very good Real Madrid side. We saw what they can do against Liverpool, but ultimately finish 8th or 9th in the league and miss out on European football next season. I think Frank Lampard probably won't stay on, but what he'll do is he'll put himself in the window for the next team who needs a manager to potentially pick him as the best option. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if Lampard's in a Premier League job next season, but just not at Chelsea. So yeah, that's what I would expect from this. But is it the right move for Chelsea? Well, if they don't feel right now that there's a manager on the market who'd be willing to join them with 10 games to go in the end of this season, like obviously that there is a few available right now. Zinedine Zidane, Mauricio Pochettino, Julian Nagelsmann's just been sacked by Bayern Munich. So there are a few available. Even Antonio Conte, he could make a return to Chelsea. But it's just, will they want to join them, or will they want a full transfer window before they get started? That's what happens a lot of the time. You very rarely see in football these days the big clubs appoint a manager in April time, that as in a non-interim manager who is there for the future. It's usually either in the summer or with about anywhere between the summer and halfway through the season. After the halfway stage, after February, March time, it's very rare you'll see some of the top clubs appoint a world-class manager. So that's probably why, and that's what happens a lot of the time. Chelsea, I mean, that's happened loads of times with them, with the amount of managers that they've gone through. Like, you know, the amount of even the amount of interim managers they've had. They had Rafa Benitez in 2013. Even person that Benitez replaced, Roberto Di Matteo, he was initially an interim manager, but he won the Champions League, so they gave it him permanently. It didn't go very well the next season, so Benitez replaced him. They've also had Gus Hiddink. So yeah, they've had their a fair few interim managers. I'm not even sure if Avram Grant was, or even Scolari, if they were interims. I can't remember. I was too young to know about that. I think I was only about 4 or 5 when they were Chelsea managers. So yeah, forgive me for not knowing that. But yeah, I think. But the bottom line is, I think this is probably the correct appointment for Chelsea right now, if they, feel as though they can't get who they want in to be permanent manager. I think hiring Frank Lampard, there's nothing really to lose this season, and it will, make the fans feel positive about the club again. But anyway, thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.